I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Please note that the meeting is being recorded, and so it will be available. If you could all introduce yourselves in the chat box. So you just mention your name and where you're from, and your country, as well as your organization. We'll also have interpretation for Portuguese, so you should be able to find the channel just at the bottom of your menu. So you can select language interpretation, and we'll have interpretation for Portuguese. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We'll be launching the new synthesis report titled Fair Share, Shining Light on the Extractive Industries Fiscal Regimes in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Uganda. Welcome, everybody feel welcomed. I am Gloria Majiga Kamoto. I work with the Center for Environmental Policy and Advocacy as a program manager. I'm also the national coordinator for Publish What You Pay Malawi, and I represent Anglophone Africa on the Publish What You Pay Global Council. We are about to begin, and I'd like to remind everyone that you can introduce yourself in the chat box. This is going to be a very interactive session. As we hear from the experiences, we'll also have an opportunity to share our own experiences. So please feel free to share your questions and comments as the discussions proceed, but also to introduce yourselves in the chat box. So we'll have a very interesting discussion today. And so I would love to welcome everyone and all comrades from Tax Justice Network Africa and the Publish What You Pay coalition countries. It's quite good to be able to see everyone here again. This has become the new way of interacting, but I'm quite thankful to still have the opportunity to interact with everyone. The webinar today officially marks the launch and publication of the report findings from the 3 coalition member countries of Mozambique, Tanzania, and Uganda. A bit of background on the research: it was conducted in 2019 with support from the International Secretariat and the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was part of a project which was designed to promote extractive tax transparency with a view to enhancing understanding of the current fiscal regimes and exploring how more equitable and sustainable development could be achieved through better natural resource governance, including by improving these fiscal frameworks. Now, our governments for very long have touted the extractive sector industry as a way of generating revenues to facilitate much needed development in form of industry, infrastructure, and public services. However, time and time again, the industry has failed to live up to these expectations because of a combination of factors, including weak governance systems and fiscal regimes that have failed to facilitate optimization of mining revenues. As Publish What You Pay, we are guided by the principle that managing natural resources with greater transparency, participation, and accountability could help us fuel development in countries rich in oil, gas, and mineral wealth, and that civil society has a critical role to play in overseeing the good governance of the sector. Now, central to this is ensuring fair tax regimes that benefit resource-dependent countries. These principles are more important than ever as we now grapple with newer and more complex challenges, such as the global climate crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, which have both contributed to global economic shocks, not least in the extractive industries. We've seen lower oil demand with declining prices and mining supply chain disruptions, providing an ominous signal of what is to come as the climate crisis takes hold. It looks bleak, and the pandemic has certainly pulled resource-rich countries in conflicting directions and increased the urgency to maximize income from oil, gas, or mining projects. It has also simultaneously revealed how precarious the future is. And if we rely on these projects, and if we are still to rely on these projects to fill the state coffers, these are all things that we need to be considering. It's against this complex backdrop, we've seen the governments of Mozambique, Uganda, and Tanzania having to operate and navigate these new and complex challenges. These are all historically mining nations. They have recently become oil and gas producers, and they all face immense challenges in avoiding a race to the bottom through low tax concessions and navigating how and even whether the wave of oil and gas discoveries in their nations can translate into tangible benefits for the citizens. Now, as these countries look towards economic prosperity in the expectations of revenues from these projects, there are increasing risks of viability in the shadow of the imminent energy transition, but also the climate crisis. It's becoming increasingly difficult to decipher what a good deal looks like for citizens in these countries. Against the lean global carbon budget and the possibility that perhaps the time frame for benefiting from these resources is very minimal, but perhaps also has already passed. It is very clear, I would say, that failing to receive adequate tax revenues from these projects and in these industries will certainly be a huge failure if we do not consider how much more we can do for the communities that need to benefit from these revenues. Now, given the weak legal structures and fragile socioeconomic situations in our countries, the onus for change rests heavily on civil society. It also rests on academia, and it also rests on the grassroots activists. So people that are in this room today have that responsibility, and we've got a huge role to play in ensuring that we are addressing these challenges. We face the immense challenge of ensuring that our nation's laws, regulations, and agreements are transformed so that for the first time, host communities can truly benefit from the natural resources that they live with. It is, after all, communities on the front line of oil, gas, and mining operations who bear the brunt of extraction. It is therefore my hope this morning that this report will frame national, regional, and global conversations on how we can facilitate a much needed change for economies relying on the extractive industries for development. The path to change is through transparency, and PWYP remains committed to making this a reality. So I wish us a very productive discussion this morning, and I hope that we can all benefit from this report and the oncoming opportunities for us to engage and further discuss. Welcome again, everyone, and I wish us a good launch and webinar this morning. I would like to welcome Mukasiri, who will take us into the next stage of our discussions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gloria. And let me start by congratulate you for being the 2021 Goldman Prize winner. In Zimbabwe, Kamoto means fire. So the energy, the vibe, we always feel it, and your presence is greatly cherished. But I think in terms of the context setting for this report, there are some key bullet points that I will take from your welcome remarks. We are faced with an extremely difficult time or situation where we are talking about COVID that has widened the finance gap in terms of basic service delivery, but at the same time shrinking tax revenue. We are also increasingly faced with a scenario where we are talking about decarbonization, transitioning away from fossil fuel at a time when Africa is saying that Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and other countries like Zimbabwe are discovering their gas and oil and look also to benefit from it. These are all difficult times, but it's also critical that we appreciate that over a decade now has passed since the Africa mining vision, when the African heads of state and government met and agreed that we need to leverage better our minerals for sustainable development. But what lessons have been learned now? Where are we going? And organizations such as the African Tax Administration Forum, the Intergovernmental Forum on Minerals, Mining Minerals and Metals for Sustainable Development, IGF, have also come together to talk about the future of resource taxation, because it is not working. That's what is very clear. If anything, what COVID has shown us that our resources are not available when we talk about cushioning our citizens or African people from the health pandemics, from worsening poverty and inequality. So this is the broader context that we are discussing about the redesigning of fiscal regime, shining a spotlight to see what are the gaps, how can they be strengthened to ensure that there is that connection between our mineral wealth, or oil, gas wealth, and sustainable development is very clear. So I've got researchers from Mozambique, that is Camilo, with PWYP. From Tanzania, we have got Rachel Chagonja, and then from Uganda, we have got Robert Banganda, and then lastly the consultant again from Uganda to give us an overall picture of this research. But in the next 5 minutes to 8 minutes, I'm going to give this opportunity to Camilo from Mozambique. Just share us the key headshots, key findings from the reports in the next 5 to 8 minutes. You've got the floor, Camilo. Sorry, is Camilo available? If he's not available, then we can move to Uganda. Robert Banganda, I hope you're available in the next 5 to 8 minutes. Can you give us the overall picture in terms of the research findings and recommendations from Uganda?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Baganda. Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Baganda, and I'm the coordinator for PWYP Uganda. Briefly, the research we analyzed the effectiveness of the Uganda's oil and gas fiscal regime. So that's what we looked at. Briefly, Uganda discovered oil in 2006, and about 6.5 billion of barrels have been discovered. And this research looked at the fiscal regime for both the upstream and the downstream. That is looking at the exploration, development, and production, and also looking at the refining, processing, and conversion. And so the study looked at both the upstream and midstream. And you know that Uganda, in order to exploit its oil, Uganda has decided to construct a pipeline to export crude oil from Uganda up to the port in Tanga in Tanzania. And also Uganda is also planning to construct a refinery. So the physical regime we looked at is basically, we looked at how Uganda is generating and also utilizing and also managing the revenues from the oil and gas sector. So this study basically looked at the institutional, it looked at the legal and other issues pertaining the management, the physical management of the revenues. So we looked at the laws managing the oil and gas. We looked at the National Oil and Gas Policy of 2008. We looked at the Petroleum Exploration, Development and Production, that is the Act 2013 of the upstream, then petroleum refining, gas processing and conversion, transport and storage, that is also 2013. And then we looked at the Public Finance Management Act, of 2015. So we were looking at the provisions which define the management, the generation and the revenue management and generation, and also utilization in these roles. But we also looked at the institutions that are managing the revenues. We looked at the Ministry of Energy. We looked at the Uganda Petroleum Authority, Uganda Revenue Authority, the National Oil Company, the Bank of Uganda, and the Ministry of Finance. So in all of these, we are looking at these roles provides for the income tax, the capital gains tax, the annual fees, the training and research fees, the application and renewal fees, and other forms of income that accrue from the oil and gas sector. Both the ones that already the government is getting in this phase of exploration, but also we also looked at other revenues that will be generated when the country starts the production. And in all of this, we discovered that there is some the legal and institutional framework we discovered is there, but it is not adequate enough to provide for the generation and management and utilization. Yes. So in all of this, we discovered that there are issues. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Robert. Please proceed. You have got 2 minutes to wind up the conversation.
Can you hear me? Okay.
You have got 2 minutes. Please.
2 minutes to wind
2
up.
minutes.
Okay. We had recommendations from the study, and recommendations we recommended that there's need to review the laws, including the Public Finance Management Act. We also recommended that there's need to make a standalone revenue management law, and also we also proposed that there is need to amend the oil laws, and also we also proposed that there's need to hire expert negotiators to negotiate on behalf of government, especially the contracts. We also propose that there is need to strengthen the capacity of people who are dealing with the taxes, and then develop the disclosure regime that makes contracts and associated documents easy to find, and this should include publication of these documents electronically and online. Then we also propose that there is need to review the production sharing agreements to remove the confidentiality clauses and ensure that the new public sharing agreements do not contain confidentiality clauses. And also we proposed for the expediting the renegotiation of existing harmful double taxation agreements, undertake proper negotiations and due diligence before signing the new agreements. And also make it mandatory to publish all the reports on oil in kind, both in kind and also received by the National Oil Company in a disaggregated manner, indicating the source and time of the receipt. In conclusion, it is therefore important that the frameworks, the structures that constitute the petroleum sector fiscal regime is effective so that it benefits the citizens of the country. So the effectiveness of the fiscal regime is the one that ensures that government generates adequate and appropriate share that benefits the citizens of the country. That is briefly what came out from the Ugandan research. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Robert, for that quick and incisive presentation. Colleagues, make use of the chat box in case you've got some questions that you want to pose or even comments. Now let's move on to Rachel, and let me start by saying condolences for the loss of the late His Excellency John Pombe Magufuli. And I'm sure there was a lot that happened in terms of his influence on resource governance and the designing of fiscal regimes. But we want to understand also, given the timely report that has been produced, what now for Tanzania? Can you please proceed to share?
Do you mind giving me access to PowerPoint sharing, please?
Brian, can you please assist Rachel to be able to share the PowerPoint?
Yes, please go ahead.
As we start,
5 to 8 minutes.
Okay. I'm starting now, right? Just to start, my name is Rachel Chagonja. Thank you, Mkasiri, for the introduction. I work with Publisher to Pay Tanzania. And just to summarize the findings for Tanzania, for us, we have been looking at the implication of the mining sector, fiscal regime, extractive sector fiscal regime to the economy. And we have specifically been looking at the mining sector. Why the mining sector, despite the fact that we also have hydrocarbons, is the fact that we have been mining for more than 30 years, and that gave us a leverage to try to assess the implication to the economy. Mining activities in Tanzania are largely characterized by both large scale and small scale. And over the years, we have been seeing that there have been a number of reforms starting from the 1960s to 1990s, and then from 1990s to 2015, but also from 2015 to 2017, as its amendments are still ongoing. The fiscal regime itself, it's characterized by the fact that the government is the owner of the resources, and that they have the ultimate decision to impose any type of taxes or charges that have been put in the sector. There are a number of several laws and regulations that are governing the mining fiscal regime in Tanzania, as I've lighted there. But also in terms of key features, we have a number of features. We have resource-based features, non-resource-based features. With resource-based feature revenues, we have 5, as I've been indicated. But with non-resource, we have 13 that also charge at different rates according to both domestic and foreign investors. And other resource-based revenues that we have are also 11, but these are more related to workers' taxes and things like environmental related taxes. When we are discussing about the implication to the economy of the mining fiscal regime, is that first of all, we need to understand that the Tanzanian mining sector has been earmarked as a catalyst for the industrial agenda of 2025. And sources of that are expected to be generated from revenues, raw materials, but also through procurement of goods and services. Key indicators to chart that and to assess its impact to the contribution to the economy, we are looking at the mining sector contribution made from the foreign direct investments, which over the years have increased that more than 5%, and then contribution to the GDP, that is the gross domestic product, but also we are looking at indicators such as capital flows from the value chain, exports, but also local investments in terms of local content and CSR initiatives. It is prudent to note that in order to assess the contribution of the fiscal regime, we only have to start during the start of the project. Over the years, as I've said before, the mining sector has contributed significantly to the economy, to the growth, but also to the local payments. As you can see from the different sources, we can see increase of FDIs from 2014 to 2019 have been fluctuating, but also with an increase, as I said, 5%. And change here with this small number here, it has been because of the number of legal amendments that have been happening since the 5th phase of the administration. Contribution to the economy, to the revenues, as you can see, from 2015 up to 2020, this is how much it has been contributed. But also to the gross domestic product, we have seen that there has been 5.2% increase to the GDP. But also in terms of service levies that have been contributed by big mining companies, you can see in this pie chart how much has been contributed. Geita having the most share of the local services levies that have been contributed to the sector. In terms of value for export, you can also see that from 2017 up to 2020, we have seen a value increase in the export, and this is a current source from the Bank of Tanzania. But also in terms of procurement, as I said, we have seen an increase in terms of procurement of goods and services vis-a-vis that are procured domestically, vis-a-vis those that are procured internationally. So our key findings, despite a significant contribution that we're seeing, key finding is that still there is the policy, legal framework, and competitiveness in the sector have caused volatility of the sector's performance, because a number of changes are happening that have been impacting the way operations and taxes are charged at different levels. But also the question of getting a fair share from the mining sector is still critical for the discussion among stakeholders. You can refer that 2 years ago, Tanzania and the Barrick Gold Mining, they decided to renegotiate their contracts under the terms of 50-50 share of economic benefits. But the unpacking and the understanding of this new type of share is still very critical for discussion, and what would that mean in terms of the contribution to the entire economy. Again, competitiveness of the sector has shaken the confidence of investors to invest, because despite the fact we may have few taxes, but they are in terms of rates, they are charged at a very high rate. So this has shaken the investors' performance, the investors' confidence to invest in the new frameworks that are happening right now. Ambition to reach 10% contribution of the GDP to the Vision 2025, it is still very unrealistic. As I said, there are a number of factors that are causing that. One is the policy and legal framework. And because the mining policy that we're still using right now, it's still very outdated, so it has not captured the change and amendments that have been undertaken thereof. Revenue tracking from the mining sector is still challenging, because all our revenues are being collected into the consolidated fund. And once they are distributed into different budget votes, it's difficult to understand how much of the mining revenues have been distributed into different sectors of economy for development projects. Again, as I said before, that Tanzania has been mining for more than 30 years. However, during all that time, Tanzania does not have a specific mining revenue legislation that governs how its revenues are collected, and this is contrary to what is happening to the oil and gas. Social payments and initiative challenges, the question about local content and the capacity of locals to supply in the value chain across the extractive sector is also very challenging. Lack of clear vision to link the mining sector with the industrialization agenda also, it makes it difficult to determine or to forecast the actual contribution of the mining sector to the economy. Maybe I just need to note here that also the outbreaks of COVID-19 and other pandemics that will be overseen thereafter, it's something that as resource-rich countries have to look at, because we have seen negative impacts to the small-scale mining subsector, whereas with large-scale miners, we have seen that there was the high prices of gold that also made it stable for Tanzania to maintain its status in terms of the gold production. But however, with small-scale miners, it was greatly impacted. Recommendations, first of all, among others, is that there is need for the government to strengthen the tax management system in the mining sector, but also there is need to adhere to the enforcement and stabilizing the policy and legal framework so that it can bring back the investors' confidence in terms of investing into new projects. A number of changes that have happened have inhibited, or they have slugged back the number of new investments in the country, and this has implications in the future. But also, as I said before, we need to, as a country, and having mined for more than 20 years, there's need to have a specific mining revenue management legislation that will lead to the establishment of a mining revenue fund for the intergenerational savings. And to proceed with this, we as publisher to Pay Tanzania, we went further under this research to draft a model law that will guide how revenues from the mining sector should be managed. It is our expectation that through this model law, we'll be able to advocate for change to have this legislation in place. Issues of dialogue and stakeholders consultation is still very key in order to ensure that we get a lot of comments in order to improve the governance and management of the sector. But also there is need for having regular financial auditing for the financial models that will bridge the gap between the underreporting of the mining companies in Tanzania. Lastly, as I said, because we are looking at Vision 2025 and tapping from the mining sector, there is need for Tanzania to craft a clear strategy to translate the sector and the industrial policies into reality. Otherwise, we'll be living into a dream that will never realize. So to mention a few, we can get a copy of our research. After this, we can share it widely for further discussion, and I'll be happy to respond to any comments that will come here in. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gloria. That was quite clear, and I will not add legs to a snake. Right. Let's move on quickly to Mozambique, where a lot is happening. Conflict taking center stage, and we want to see at what extent are there opportunities for revitalizing the fiscal regime to ensure that the benefits from the oil and gas sector are shared to promote peace and prosperity in Mozambique, as well as sustainable development. We have got Camilo with us here to quickly walk us through the report findings from Mozambique. In 5 to 8 minutes, please kindly share what are the key findings from Mozambique.
Muito obrigado, Mukassir. Acredito que há tradução. Eu vou fazer esta apresentação em português, que é para facilitar também o meu processo aqui. Primeiro, dizer que nós, aqui em Moçambique, analisamos a efetividade do regime fiscal aplicado ao projeto da bacia do Rovuma, portanto, especificamente o projeto Golfinho Atum, tendo em conta que é um grande projeto que está na área 4, portanto, na área do projeto da área 1, que é liderado, portanto, neste momento pela Total, que é a francesa, exatamente na região onde temos o conflito armado agora, em Palma. Quero acreditar que estão a encontrar a tradução aí. Dizer primeiro que, na verdade, o regime fiscal em Moçambique, que é aplicado, é uma combinação de impostos, de direitos aduaneiros, de contribuições de encargos, interesses participativos e também mecanismos de partilha de produção e taxas de licenciamento. No entanto, importa referir que para este projeto específico que estamos aqui a analisar, ele foi assinado à luz da legislação, portanto, anterior, que foi, portanto, a Lei do Código de Benefícios Fiscais aprovada em 2012, assim como também do Código do IPC, pelo decreto também de 2002 e a Lei de Investimentos, portanto, de 2003. No entanto, em 2014, houve uma revisão legislativa, portanto, do regime fiscal em Moçambique, portanto, para melhorar este processo. Mas este projeto, especificamente este do Golfinho Atum, ele não está abrangido por esta nova lei, apesar de, na lei de 2014, ter-se solicitado que as empresas que precisassem pudessem juntar-se a este novo regime, mas nenhuma das empresas, tanto que está na lei anterior, prontificou-se a juntar. Mas, de uma maneira geral, o regime fiscal aplicado para Moçambique é um regime transparente de uma forma geral. Os tributos da nova lei, portanto, estão estabelecidos, das empresas estão estabelecidos na lei, e as taxas aplicáveis também são igualmente estabelecidos na lei, incluindo também os incentivos fiscais concedidos. Como disse, o contrato de golfinho atum foi com base na legislação anterior, e este é bastante generoso. Oferece uma série de benefícios fiscais que realmente são muito excessivos e prejudiciais para o povo moçambicano. Isto vai desde a redução de impostos sobre a produção, taxas de imposto sobre rendimento, também a recuperação dos custos, isenções na importação e exportação de bens e serviços. Por outro lado, estas empresas desta área, portanto, este grupo também, em 2014, negociou um decreto-lei com o governo moçambicano de uma forma não transparente, portanto, um decreto fora daquilo que é a legalização, e isto legalizou a oportunidade de fuga de capital para paraísos fiscais, pois o decreto também concede uma série de isenções, garantias legais, incluindo o regime jurídico aplicado entre as empresas e essas companhias ao nível deste decreto, e permitindo que as empresas possam canalizar na totalidade as receitas de exportação de mercadorias pagas através de contas no estrangeiro, portanto, fora de Moçambique. E isto permite a canalização de fundos para offshore e, logicamente, dando um risco para a fuga de capitais em Moçambique. Por outro lado, para além dessas isenções fiscais generosas que a legislação, portanto, o contrato oferece, há outros riscos também associados que podem levar com que o Estado moçambicano realmente não arrecade as receitas de forma como esperado, como, por exemplo, a fraca capacidade do Estado de fazer uma auditoria adequada aos projetos. Portanto, Moçambique tem mais de 20 anos de experiência de exploração do gás natural, começado pela SASO, mas até pouco tempo, estamos a falar de 2018, não tinha capacidade de fazer, portanto, as devidas auditorias e supervisão adequada ao setor de hidrocarbonetos, tendo apenas em 2018 iniciado este processo através da contratação de um consultor que está a capacitar as entidades. Então, podemos ver de lá até 2018, 2016, e também há vários relatórios do próprio Tribunal Administrativo que referem que esta falta de supervisão, essa falta de verificação, realmente pode levar a perdas, sobretudo dos custos recuperáveis, porque as empresas podem declarar custos recuperáveis que realmente 3 anos depois, se o governo certifica, esses custos recuperáveis são considerados como, portanto, recuperáveis, e o governo, o Estado moçambicano deverá pagar. Por outro lado, também há um risco da volatilidade de preços, que depende do mercado internacional, e isto tem se verificado nos últimos anos, uma variação em que...
Sorry, Camilo.
Sim,
you have a minute to wind up.
Como?
A minute to wind up.
1 minuto. Ok. Vou muito rapidamente para aquilo que são as recomendações. Muito rapidamente. Nós recomendamos que o Estado deve criar primeiro capacidade ao nível das suas entidades de supervisão, sobretudo para que possa verificar e possa portanto, assegurar que as empresas orem todos os compromissos. Também deve haver uma capacidade técnica de monitorização, sobretudo dos processos de exploração dos recursos extrativos, mas também capacitar a autoridade, portanto, que faz a recolha de dados. Outro aspecto importante é que o Estado moçambicano participa em todos os projetos, e isto pode ser muito oneroso para o Estado, porque esta empresa NH moçambicana, ela participa e não tem receitas. Esses fundos, para poder participar, devem ser financiados através da avaliação. O Estado portanto, que tem que procurar ser o avalista, e isto pode ter consequências importantes para o endividamento público, o que significa que o Estado, neste momento, as receitas que podem advir nessa altura poderão ser para pagar este endividamento da empresa moçambicana, portanto, que participa em todos os setores. Por isso, nós também recomendamos que tenha que haver uma avaliação dos termos e como é que a empresa moçambicana participa em todos esses projetos, na perspectiva de 10%, 15%, o que isso também pode, talvez, gorar as expectativas de que vamos ter receitas e, no final, essas receitas que vamos realmente arrecadar, elas sirvam para pagar, portanto, a dívida arrecadada por esta empresa pública que participa nestas portanto, empresas. E também, por fim, como digo, a questão do risco de fuga de capitais, nós achamos que as empresas aqui em Moçambique devem domiciliar as suas contas no país, porque se domiciliam as contas fora de Moçambique, realmente isso vai fazer com que haja portanto, negociações entre essas empresas que vai permitir com que haja essa fuga de capitais fora de Moçambique e, sobretudo, essa questão das empresas poderem abrir as suas contas nos paraísos fiscais, e isso também pode prejudicar, portanto, aquilo que vai ser a arrecadação de receitas em Moçambique. Penso que tentei ser este é um minuto que eu tive para dizer e acho que vou terminar por aqui. Muito obrigado.
Thanks very much, my colleague and the brother Camilo. That was a textured, appreciation of the fiscal regime in Mozambique and how people, Mozambicans, can derive a fair share of benefit. What needs to be done? We are not doing good in terms of time, so I'm going to quickly move over to Dr. Dan Gabirano with Makerere University, just to give us an eagle eye in terms of what's obtaining in these three countries and also high-level recommendations so that we can lobby AU and other African governments some quick takeaways for learning. Over to you, Dr. Dan Gabirano.
Thank you very much, Kasiri, and everyone that is listening in to this webinar. As introduced, my name is Dan Gabirano from Makerere University here in Kampala. I had the honor to author the thesis report, which puts together all the three country studies. And I'll just, as Mukasiri has guided, I'll be going through the corrective findings of the three country studies and end it up with recommendations. I want to thank my colleagues in the three countries. I think they have done a very great job in speaking to specific country contexts. And so without given the time limitations, I will not go back into that, but I will delve straight into the key findings of the thesis report. So here is what we find. We find that on paper, all the three countries have relatively robust and effective tax and other revenue collection systems. And we come to this conclusion by applying the African Commission Human and People's Rights reporting guidelines in respect to the extractive industries, which, although human rights guidelines speak very strongly to fiscal aspects of managing extractive industries in Africa. Of course, at this particular point, there is no sort of universal guideline as to how fiscal regimes should look like. And so it seems to be that it's largely dependent on different other factors, priorities of countries, complexity involved in the extraction of these resources, market prices, and so on and so forth. But in the Commission's reporting guidelines, we see an effort to come up with some kind of broad guideline on how extractive fiscal regimes should look like if they are to guarantee countries a fair share of revenue, but also meaningfully contribute to the transformation of lives of citizens in these countries. So in that particular respect, we find that there's a relatively robust system. And we see this in terms of, existence of legislation, that seeks to tax different aspects of incomes from the extractives, talk about corporate income taxes, capital gains taxes, withholding taxes, and other forms of indirect taxes in some respect. But also we see regimes that seek to impose further revenue payments from companies in the form of royalties, bonuses, fees, institutional contributions, local government levies in the case of Tanzania. And these have begun to yield already. If you look at the Ugandan example, for instance, Uganda has been able to realize close to $1 billion United States dollars from its petroleum. That is even before the first drop of commercial oil comes out of the ground. You turn to Mozambique, they've been able to realize about 1.4 billion in capital gains tax from just the Ruvumba Basin, Atum Gorfino, which was the basis of this study. You come to Tanzania, they've been able to realize close to 1.8 billion just for 2018-2019, according to the Bank of Tanzania, from the mining sector. So there's certainly a progressive fiscal regime in the sense that it's able to yield revenues. However, we also find that the ability of countries to obtain a fair share of the extractive industry's revenues is often held back by past mistakes and compromises that were made in the negotiation of pre-existing resource agreements. These exist in the form of unjustified incentives at the expense of the host countries. You turn to a country like Mozambique, for instance, you find that for the Ruvuma Basin projects, companies are entitled to 25% discount in corporate income taxes. And these stories are repeat in all the three countries. You find in Tanzania, there are stamp duty exemptions for mining companies, those that signed MDAs before the new laws. We also find that the ability of countries to obtain a fair share has been greatly affected by the existence of stabilization clauses. These limit the ability of states to pursue tax reforms for maximum revenue generation. And you find that despite the fact that a country like Mozambique, for instance, has had reforms in its petroleum and tax laws in 2014 and 2017, revising, among others, the rate of royalties as well as corporate income tax. These do not apply to projects like
2 minutes to wind up.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know how to handle this, but I'll try to do that. Thanks, Mukasiri. So in short, countries have quite extensive fiscal regimes, but these are held back. Only Tanzania emerges as an exception in this case. It's taken a revolutionary approach to insist on sovereignty of its resources and recently enacted laws that enable Parliament to review and renegotiate existing agreements. So far, we see that it has been successful with Barrick Gold. But other than that, we see that countries like Uganda and Tanzania still continue to be held back by these clauses in these agreements. There's also a limited capacity of states to audit and approve recoverable costs. I think Camille already spoke about Mozambique and how delays in audit and approval of costs cost the country United States dollars 33 million in the period of 2015-2017. Of course, there's a tendency to overstate costs by companies, and this we find in Tanzania, where 12 mining companies overstated their expenditure by about 176 million US dollars. The same is true in Uganda as well. Lastly, the other issue that affects the fiscal regime is the high risk of illicit financial flows, the transfer of money and capital from one country to another, illicit transfer of money from one country to another. And again, the report is replete with examples of this. Tanzania, you have African Barrick Gold that was found to have evaded paying about 81.1 million United States dollars by the Court of Appeal by declaring losses for over a period of 4 years, while at the same time remitting dividends to its shareholders in the UK. In Mozambique, you find that the sale of unadulterated assets attracted much less capital gains taxes, that is 22.5 instead of 32%. In Uganda, it has been said that the registration of Dutch subsidiaries by all companies could cost the country an estimated United States dollars 28.7 million. So these are real challenges. There could have been more, but because of time, I won't go into that. I'll now dive straight into the recommendations. So in light of this, the report recommends for resource-rich countries to seriously take their obligation to report under the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, particularly in respect to standards relating to effective fiscal regulation, tax correction, equitable revenue sharing. The report also calls upon countries to negotiate existing resource agreements that seek to limit the ability of states to maximize their revenues. Urgent renegotiation of existing DTAs, establishment of beneficial ownership registers, incorporation of early warning systems and conflict management into resource governance. We also call upon countries to publish without any further delays all past, present, future, and future resource agreements. Lastly, for countries to align their mining laws and policies with the Africa mining vision, which has got some progressive provisions in respect to effective fiscal regimes. For now, I'll stop it at that, Kasiri, because of time, but I encourage everyone to look out for the report. It's much more detailed, both the status report as well as the country study reports. Thank you. I'll be on standby for any questions.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was quite lively in terms of what needs to happen for Tanzania, Uganda, and Mozambique to move forward, but more so for Africa as well to reflect and take some key points in terms of learning and also reforming the fiscal regimes. But the key question here is, if we are getting capital gains tax before the extraction of the oil and gas for 1.5 billion, is it not proof enough that we are also undervaluing the capital that we have seeded in terms of transfer of those rights, looking at the reserves of oil and gas that the countries have? But let me park this for now. And as we wind up, I want us to start with the Rachel. Please, all the presenters, I urge you, because of limited time, to respond to the questions that have been raised via the chat box as well. But a quick one for you, Rachel. It's about Uganda. Also, it's about Tanzania. Do you think that this is an opportunity for lobbying the country mining vision? As you respond in a minute or less, also share any challenges or opportunities for towards a people-centered mining fiscal regime in Tanzania. So over to you, Rachel, in a minute or less.
Oh, thank you so much, Mukasiri. I'm not sure if I tapped your last question, but however, I've managed to respond to some of the questions that have been asked on the Q&A box. Do you think there's an opportunity to advocate for mining vision? Yes, there is an opportunity. As I said before, Tanzania is looking at the mining sector as a catalyst to drive or to realize its Vision 2025. And it wants to tap from mining resources to be able to provide incentives for the Vision 2025. However, the challenge is Mukasiri, do you hear me?
Sorry, I lost you. I don't know if it was my network or your network.
I think it was across. I just received notes that it's across. So I was saying our mining, there's need to advocate for a mining vision to have a mining vision because it will be able to address current trends and the source of contribution towards the realization of Vision 2025. Minus that, we'll be living a unrealistic dream, as I said before. We need to know, how do we look at the mining sector to contribute to the industrialization agenda? Are we providing direct resources as raw materials, or are we looking at revenues that will be collected to be able to lead to the growth of industries? So it's a discussion that as civil society we still need to push for, and we still need to advocate for a clear strategy that will link with the Vision 2025 on how these resources will be used to leverage the industrialization agenda.
Thanks very much, Rachel. A quick one in less than a minute for you, Dr. Ngabirano. This is coming from Gerald Muturi. The amount you have cited as having been received by Tanzania, quoting the Bank of Tanzania as a source, is it export revenue that went to companies, or is it tax, fees, and other charges that went to the government of Tanzania? In a minute, please respond.
Thank you, Mukasiri, and thanks for the question. So this would be the total earnings that Tanzania received from minerals during this particular period. Yeah, total earnings from all avenues.
Thanks very much, Dr. Ngabirano, for that quick response. Then over to you, Robert. For Uganda, this one is coming from Alec. One of their recommendations is to strengthen the capacity of those dealing with revenue. What are the main problem with people in the revenue, and how sure are they that when their capacity is strengthened, changes will be there, while corruption sometimes underpin the revenue collection? So in less than a minute, Robert, over to you.
I beg your pardon, my network was bad. You can repeat a bit.
Mukasiri, your mic is muted.
Sorry about that. From Alec, he's asking that one of the recommendations is about strengthening those that are in charge of revenue collection. But if this is, if their capacity is strengthened, given the high levels of corruption, will this change anything? That one is from Alex. So in less than a minute, kindly respond, please.
On the utilization, but collection on collection of the revenues, the corruption is not much, because the procurement in the oil and gas and also mining is unique. So the issue is about corruption is when the resources are being utilized, and which is a different issue. So we need to. We are talking about the generation, but when it comes to the management, yes, we need to strengthen also our laws on to curb corruption, especially on utilization. So I think the best will be to strengthen. We talked about strengthening the oversight of Parliament. To make sure that the monies, especially that come from the revenues from the oil and the gas, are appropriated by Parliament, because what has been happening is that you find sometimes the government utilizes money without the authorization of Parliament. But if that one is done, I think the issue of corruption would be.
Thanks, Robert. And finally, Camilo, what is the biggest hurdle when it comes to, in your country's extractive sector, when it comes to crafting a people-centered fiscal regime? So respond in a minute.
Sim, no caso moçambicano, acho que, como disse, o regime fiscal em si é transparente e oferece boas oportunidades para tanto, coleta de receitas favoráveis. O mais importante é que precisamos de fortalecer as nossas instituições, sobretudo as instituições de supervisão, ao nível do próprio Estado, mas também, como disse o meu colega do Uganda, o Parlamento tem um papel muito importante. Há um aspecto muito importante em Moçambique que nós estamos aqui a discutir neste momento, que é a questão do alinhamento de todo o processo de transparência fiscal, o processo de coleta de receitas com um plano de desenvolvimento, e um plano de desenvolvimento que tem que haver um pacto social entre o governo e portanto, e as pessoas e o povo. Então, também a capacidade de exercício da cidadania por parte dos cidadãos, isso também poderá ajudar realmente que o regime fiscal seja centrado às pessoas. Quando falamos de um regime fiscal centrado às pessoas, estamos a falar do regime fiscal que olhe para a coleta de receitas para investir no desenvolvimento social, no desenvolvimento de infraestruturas sociais, de infraestruturas que vão para o desenvolvimento. Neste momento, em Moçambique, estamos a discutir, por exemplo, a questão do Fundo Soberano, que é muito importante para nós, como sociedade civil, interligar o Fundo Soberano como um mecanismo transparente de gestão de receita, e este mecanismo de gestão de receita tem que haver também com um regime fiscal robusto, capaz de, portanto, fazer com que arrecadamos receitas que realmente sirvam para o povo. E este regime fiscal, só assim, quando estas receitas realmente são utilizadas, temos que olhar para tanto a coleta, assim como a alocação. Penso que não olhamos apenas para o regime fiscal como um regime fiscal, mas para todo o processo de desenvolvimento e como é que o cidadão participa na fiscalização, logicamente através do parlamento forte, mas também através da prática de cidadania do cidadão moçambicano em si só, mas de todas as instituições robustas, capazes realmente de fazer cumprir, capazes de fazer com que o regime fiscal, da forma como ele está neste momento, penso que há uma janela importante para tal. Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. You can see the energy, the passion in terms of the whole conversation. Thanks, Dan, and thanks, Rachel, thanks, Robert, and Camilo for this great conversation. Over to you, Gloria.
Gloria, you're muted.
She dropped off the call, so I don't know. Might have to take it up.
Right. Let me help. I think we are supposed to have the next session. Fatima is supposed to be steering the next conversation. Is Fatima available? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, if Fatima is available, please, can you steer the next conversation?
Yes. May I start it right now?
Please take over.
All right. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm now steering or leading this next session, which will be on domestic resource mobilization through people-centered fiscal regimes. This is a question at top, and I will have as a panelist
Chennai Mukumba, which is a policy research and advocacy manager at Tax Justice Network Africa. The second panelist will be Thomas from Natural Resources Governance Institute. And the third one will be Siraji Magara Luyima, Extractive Industry Coordinator. And finally, Mr. Emmanuel Masalu from Institute of Tax Administration. So we will have 50 minutes for Chennai. She will have 10 minutes for her presentation. I will give her 10 minutes for her presentation, and I hope she can use it adequately. So Chennai, please, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Hi, Fatima. Can you hear me?
Hello, Chennai.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm just confirming that you can hear my sound.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you so much to colleagues at Publish What You Pay for inviting us at TJNA and also as members of Stop the Bleeding campaign to be able to contribute to this conversation. It really has been fascinating, I think, to hear the outcomes of the research that you did in the 3 different countries, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Uganda. Congratulations to the author, I think, for putting it all together. And then as well, congratulations to the different representatives from the country who've been able to give us a lot more context. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the report, but I think more than anything, what that report shows us is what we already know. We are living in countries that are incredibly resource rich, that are incredibly wealthy, but we still find ourselves in a position where we aren't adequately able to take advantage of the resources that we have. We aren't able to leverage and harness the potential that we have. I was listening to Dan, and one of the things Dan said that on paper we have good fiscal regimes in all of the three different countries, that they all appear to be reasonably robust, and you can see very effective tax and revenue collection systems. But I think, and I even saw it was raised in one of the questions, where does the problem lie? And it takes us back to that question of implementation and enforcement. Many of our countries, we have these great policies on paper, but when it comes to implementation, that's where we find ourselves falling short. And I think that's definitely an area that as civil society, we really need to advocate for. I think the second part, the second comment as well that I picked up following Dan's presentation was this issue of the fact that we have made mistakes in the past that now find ourselves locked into situations where we aren't able to continue to benefit from not to continue, but to begin to benefit from the natural resources that we have. And the recommendations that the papers make, I think, are very clear. We need to be looking to see how we can renegotiate some of these existing resource agreements that are limiting our state's abilities to maximize our revenues. We also need to look to see the extent to which we can urgently renegotiate some of these double taxation agreements that we have as countries. Some of the work that we've been doing as Tax Justice Network Africa is exactly this, engaging in public interest litigation with various states, either ourselves or through our partners, to take a look at some of the previous double taxation agreements that we have signed and question whether they still are, or if they ever were, in the best interest of the citizenry. And in some of these cases, we have actually won. And in some of these cases, for example, our partners in Senegal, we've seen the government actually bring a halt to the double taxation agreement that they had with Mauritius, because they could see that really that particular agreement was not working in the best interests of its citizenry. The third point that I want to talk to is one of the points that's mentioned in the report, speaking to illicit financial flows, and Camilla when he was talking, or also made reference to this. At TJNA, this is something that we spend a lot of time thinking through in terms of how can we address the situation, because it is significantly contributing to us not being able to achieve our own developmental goals. So when you think about illicit financial flows, the most recent UNCTAD report indicated that as a continent, we're losing $88 billion. The report, I made mention of this, notes that there's increasing anecdotal evidence, but I would argue that it's no longer anecdotal evidence, but much more so, we are starting to see that the illicit financial flows that we are losing as a continent significantly are being contributed to by leakages, gaps, and loopholes within our natural resources sector. According to the UNCTAD report, almost 65% of the amount of money that we're losing as a continent is happening as a result of inadequate legislation policies that we have in our natural resources sector. So it is so crucial for us, to really see the extent to which as civil society, we can begin to work together to advocate for the closing of these loopholes, for the actual enforcement of these policies that may be great on paper, but we see them not actually being fully implemented when it actually comes to enforcement. The reason illicit financial flows is such a big issue is because it's not that we are losing this money. It has multiplier effects, right? So first and foremost, we are losing money that we could be using to invest in our own social services. And so, for example, the pandemic is no longer a secret to anybody. But for many countries, the higher the illicit financial flows a country is losing, the less money that they have to invest in these social sectors. And some countries are actually spending up to 70% less in key social sectors because of illicit financial flows, right? And not only that, it's been proven that if a country has high illicit financial flows, you can see that other sectors of the economy start to have negative effects as well. So particularly for countries that are also trying to much more meaningfully engage within the diversification agenda, so that they're not being highly and solely dependent on natural resources. What we're seeing is that because of illicit financial flows that are primarily being driven by natural resource governance, other sectors themselves are also finding themselves in a situation where they are, being negatively affected. So this report, its importance, I think, cannot be understated. I think it speaks to the fact that we still have a lot of work to do, but it gives very, very clear recommendations on exactly what it is we need to do in order to address these situations. I think it speaks to not only the context within these three countries, but as far as I'm concerned, I think is also a picture of what's happening across the continent, across countries that are resource rich, that are also struggling with this paradox of incredible mineral wealth, but also incredible poverty, a lack of the actual citizenry and people who are living within that country being able to benefit from those resources. I think as I wrap up, just because I am aware of time, one of the other recommendations that the paper speaks to is the need to establish beneficial ownership registries. And this is much more important, I mean, definitely across all sectors, but especially within the mining sector. It's so important for us to know who controls, who owns, many of these mining investments that are taking place within our countries, to ensure that there is limited, conflict of interest, and to ensure transparency, so that we can ensure that the actual overseeing of this sector is being done in a way that truly is benefiting, the people who are within that population. So I think for me, Fatima, those would be my comments on those papers. As we think about domestic resource mobilization, I think there is no more urgent moment than now, where we really need to start to take the steps to enhance that. I think we find ourselves faced, of course, with this health, but much more so this economic burden where we can no longer afford to have these loopholes where we are, losing money, particularly from areas where we should be benefiting from them the most. So I think it's just to say thank you so much for putting this report together. Thank you so much for inviting us as the Stop the Bleeding campaign and as Tax Justice Network Africa. And we are very keen to work alongside, see the extent to which we can continue to advocate for many of the recommendations that are outlined in this paper. Thanks so much, Fatima.
Sorry, over to you, Fatima.
I'm not sure. She seems to have dropped off, Mukasiri.
Yes.
She's back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chennai. These things are posted. I will comment on them afterwards. So now I will pass to for Thomas Scarfield from an Africa economic analyst. An Africa economic analyst.
Hi, Fatima, you're frozen, but I think you were just introducing me, so maybe I'll just jump in.
I think go ahead, Thomas. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Fatima. My name's Tom Scarfield. I work for the Natural Resource Governance Institute. We're a non-profit that focuses on natural resource governance across the world, including in Africa, and I've spent most of the past decade based in Sierra Leone and then Tanzania. Unfortunately, back in London for the time being, given everything that's going on. It's a real privilege to be here. A really important event and discussion, and as Chennai was just saying, a really timely report. This really is an urgent issue. Well, I mean, has always been a really important issue for the countries that the study focused on, but really an increasingly urgent issue. And I think, coming at a time, as I was saying, where the world is changing fast, and with COVID and with the climate crisis and the accompanying energy transition, this is going to be a very turbulent couple of decades or so, where for resource-rich countries, there are both challenges with the move away from oil and gas, which makes getting the right deal even more important, a deal that does manage to still attract investment despite the difficult context, but also gives those countries the opportunity to benefit from the resources while they still can, but then also opportunities with the energy transition in terms of increased demand for various minerals like copper and nickel in Tanzania, cobalt in Uganda, So there's an opportunity to maybe actually benefit even more from those minerals going forwards than there has been in the past, but obviously only if we get the deals right. I thought the report did a really good job of capturing a lot of the key obstacles that Tanzania, Uganda and Mozambique have faced in the past couple of decades to benefiting from their resources. So congratulations to the authors. I thought it was a really, really useful report. I've only seen the synthesis report. I'd love to, I'm looking forward to reading the more in-depth country studies. But yeah, I thought some of the key issues that were highlighted, errors in previous deals, stable isolation clauses that locked those errors in, limited capacity, making it difficult to tackle tax avoidance, and then treaties that increased the loopholes for tax avoidance. I just wanted to, in the short time I have, just wanted to give a few thoughts on those key obstacles, and by doing that, hopefully sort of map out a few, some of the things that I think are key to these countries getting a better deal going forwards. So in terms of the errors in previous deals, I think, well, like Tanzania negotiating deals for its gold mines in the 90s when gold prices were low and they're assuming that gold prices were going to remain low for a while, they offered significant incentives to attract investment in. And the point I wanted to make on that was that, well, it's hard to know because there's no sort of counterfactual, there's no way to know what would happen if those incentives hadn't been given. But I think the key issue here is not that the incentives to attract investment were necessarily wrong. They were maybe necessary to get that investment in. What the error was that there was an assumption that the status quo was going to continue, that prices were never going to recover, profits were never going to recover. And therefore there was no instrument, no tax included in those deals that meant that if the conditions did improve, that Tanzania was going to capture some of a fair share of the benefits from those higher profits. And I think that's really important, particularly in relation to the energy transition and trying to get oil and gas investment into these countries, is that incentives might be necessary, but what is absolutely critical is if those incentives are offered, there is a way to recoup them later on if those projects are more profitable than expected. Then on limited capacity, I just wanted to say on that completely agree, limited capacity is a real issue, and efforts are being made, but need to sort of be ramped up to improve that capacity. But the fiscal regime design is also really important in terms of tax avoidance, because not all taxes are sort of some taxes are more complicated to collect than others. So taxes, like the report highlighted, that require you to measure costs are obviously a lot more complicated to measure effectively and collect than taxes like royalties, where you just have to measure the volume and value of production. So maybe placing more weight on simpler taxes like that would be a way to start tackling some of that tax avoidance. The issue there is that simpler taxes are often those that are least flexible, so aren't going to necessarily increase lots if profit increases a lot. So it's all about getting a balance. And there, I think that highlights how important being able to do financial modelling is. So for both governments who are making these deals, but also oversight actors like civil society to hold them to account, making sure that that balance between the different types of taxes that offer different advantages and disadvantages is found. So I think building up modelling capacity is absolutely critical for everyone engaged in this space, and it's something that we're trying to do a lot at NRGI. Briefly on stabilisation clauses, yeah, completely agree about the challenges with stabilisation clauses, and governments should definitely not be giving companies stabilisation clauses that are all encompassing. They cover every term in the deal and they last for the whole of the project's lifetime. Just a completely unnecessary and as everyone has highlighted, very damaging to the country. But I do think time limited stabilisation clauses that are time limited, focus on certain key terms, enable a periodic review. Essentially, a stabilisation clause that Tanzania is currently trying to introduce, they probably are still necessary. Investors do need some reassurance that they'll be able to make a return given the amount of money they're plowing into projects. So I think, yes, we need to do something about stabilisation clauses, but there's maybe a compromise that needs to be found there, and all of this should be done ideally in sort of collaboration with investors, because unfortunately, the more you sort of act unilaterally, the more companies will cling on to those stabilisation clauses or not invest. As Rachel highlighted, policy predictability is absolutely key. In fact, given policy predictability is actually often shown in sort of company surveys and stuff to be more important than the tax level for investors. So if you have a predictable policy environment, you could actually get away with having higher taxes. So I think that should be a real focus. And then finally on tax treaties, yeah, fully agree. Again, real problem needs to be looked at in each of these countries. All I wanted to say on that was that as important, if not more important, is what's going on at the global at the moment in terms of the international tax architecture. As I'm sure you're aware, the OECD and just a week or two ago, the G7 are putting together a proposal for global tax reforms. At the moment, they really do privilege the rich countries that have already from the current global tax system. I think it's as ATAF has been pointing out in various commentary, I think it's really important that countries like Tanzania, Uganda, and Mozambique become more active participants in those discussions. So I think that's maybe something that civil society could look at and highlight. That's all. Well, that's definitely all I have time for. So I'm going to stop there. But once again, congrats to all the authors of this report. I think it's really useful and extremely timely.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for this presentation. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear all your presentation. My network was really off. So, but I hope that the participants could enjoy it, and I will find some comments from them. So now I will pass over to Siraj from Extractive Industries, from Oxfam, Uganda, who is Extractive Industries Coordinator. Siraj, please, you have 10 minutes rigorously.
Hello.
Hi.
Good.
Yeah, you perfectly. Please.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good morning. How are you, Siraj?
I'm okay.
Okay,
Let me be quick. Be quick on getting out my points clearly, so that before the network disorganizes me. First of all, I want to address my analysis on the two sectors, the oil and gas and then extractives. Let me use 5 minutes for extractives. I mean for oil and gas. It is very important to note that oil and gas is bringing some good fortune in Uganda, and we are happy with the small activities that are taking place. And also to note that the legal regime, though still having challenges, at least in the oil and gas, is working very well. However, the implementation may also, as people have noted, may be the reason why we still have some challenges. But basing on the report that members have been able to put together, and thanks to the good work, and also the work we do in Uganda and extractives in the region as a whole, there are still these key challenges that I think as a region, as a continent, we need to come together and work out them. Because the moment we don't do, then it is the same old cry of we are not benefiting from the resources, even when poverty is biting us. First of all, if you look at the key resource mobilization challenges we have in oil and gas, you have talked about the illicit financial flows and more so the double tax agreements. These cannot allow us actually benefit from this sector very well, not until some of these issues are dealt with. A case in a point, if you look at Oxfam's report of 2020, we only modeled out one block and realized that in one block, Uganda, because of the double tax agreements we have with the Netherlands, Mauritius, and now even the UK, we are likely to lose around $287 million US arising from the double tax agreements. So that's the hemorrhage that would be benefiting from as Ugandans and as Africans, but that money goes away like that. Then when that one is still being done, you look at the arm twisting that comes. Even our biggest share of oil revenue has been capital gains tax. But of recent, we saw how we are unable even to raise money from capital gains tax because of the arm twisting of oil companies. The recent farm down of the Talo to Total was supposed to attract around $187 million US, but it only had to lead to legal and fighting and counter accusations, then Total closing down the operations. Then the obligation was reduced from $167 million US to only $14.5 million US. So that means all of this could be money potentially that would help us solve part of the problems. Another issue that we need to talk about is the transparency, and particularly the contract disclosure. There is no way as civil society we are going to advocate for transparent utilization of these resources, not until we are able to access contracts. The production sharing agreements are inaccessible. All the contracts that are being used in the sector are not easily accessible. Me speaking, I happen to be a CSO representative on the EITI. But even inside the ITI, we are failing to access these contracts. And some voices are saying that, for instance, the recent signed agreements of the host government agreements and the shareholding agreements, that these are not necessarily extractive contracts because they are midstream, they are business contracts, and therefore should not even be accessible under EITI. And you hear such arguments and you find out that really it's a hard job to be transparent in this sector. And until transparency is really effected and practiced not on paper, then we shall not talk about the fair share, because you cannot have share fair of what actually you don't know. And that's very, very dangerous. Now, all those happen to actually cause problems on the mobilization side. But even where it comes in, small as it is, Uganda, they say they have gotten around $1 billion since the onset of oil production, oil discoveries. But that 1 billion, how it is utilized, it is also questionable. First of all, in our law, we are still lacking the fiscal rule. The fiscal rule of, for example, the law says that the Public Finance Management Act, that when money is deposited in the petroleum fund, part of it should go to the investment reserve and part of it should go to the consolidated fund for budget spending. But as we talk now, since all that 1 billion that has been acquired so far, all that money has been spent and nothing has been taken to the investment reserve. And even when it was supposed to be put there, there is no cap on how much should go to the investment reserve and how much should go to the spending. And you realize that, yes, the law says one thing, but what is actually practiced is another. And that one brings misappropriation in most cases. And it ties with the prioritization. How is this money being utilized? Because you see, from our laws, again, they say the oil money should be used for investment in infrastructure and not for recurrent spending. However, you find that when you talk about infrastructure and you forget about key spending priorities like health. Currently, Uganda, we are actually facing it rough with COVID. Very many people are dying. We are lacking oxygen. The hospital beds are not enough, but we cannot even utilize that money to say, let's increase our bed capacity, let's beef up more production of oxygen. We only need still have to rely on donors to do some of that work. So it looks like them, and yet some of this money, you hear government saying, okay, let's buy aircraft. And the question is, equitably, if government purchases aircraft, who benefits from it? Is it the poor person who benefits from the aircraft, or it is still the rich? So the equitable share of these resources is still a challenge as we move forward. And maybe that could be the final point I would be wanting to bring here is, again, utilizing oil revenues to reinstate the environment that oil is actually destroying. Aware that oil is one of the big risks of climate change. And when you see that we talk about energy transition, we talk about so many things, but we have not utilized some of this money to help the transition. We are not utilizing some of this money, for example, to help us adapt and mitigate climate change risks. And this is also a very big problem because we are spoiling the environment by way of the oil and gas activities, but the money from oil and gas to come back to mitigate these problems we are causing is still very limited. And the law is not also very supportive to make sure that, yes, we get money from the sector, but we also use part of the sector, of the money, to restore the sector. Let me use 2 minutes to talk about the mining sector. Unlike the oil and gas sector, which is fairly organized, our mining sector is very disorganized with a weak fiscal regime. For example, I saw Tanzania, really, I was impressed, posting 5.2% contribution to GDP. Uganda of last year was only posting around 1% contribution to GDP. Only this year I saw posting 2.3% to GDP, because we have no good regime that can help us mobilize money from the extractive sector. First of all, if you look at the tax itself, the tax, we get very minimum money from the taxes, and particularly because we don't have a mechanism of even tracking how much is being produced in this country. There is no, if, for example, you ask the tax body, they cannot tell how much volume of gold is produced in Uganda. They don't have clear records on that. They cannot tell you how much of marble is produced. They cannot tell you how much of all that is produced. Consequently, there is always under declaration by the mining companies. What they declare is what actually they go on with. And we don't benefit a lot from this sector, especially the mining. If you go to the records last year, 2019-2020, Uganda only got 4.7 million United States dollars, both tax and non-tax revenue from the minerals. That's very little money compared to what I saw Tanzania posting. And out of that, actually, around 3.3 of it is non-tax revenue, is the royalties. The rest of the taxes contribute only to 1.3 million US dollars. So that means we don't have a vigorous regime that can help us generate enough revenue, and yet the sector has the potential even of contributing revenue up to 10% of GDP, just like as Tanzania has posted. So it is very important that as Africans, as people who are in this sector, we try to bring together ideas. And now that, for example, some countries like Tanzania, like Uganda, are implementing EITI, it's one avenue where we can also channel most of these issues to be handled. But of course, that's not the end game. We still have to find better options of how most of these challenges that are hindering the fair share of these resources to be handled at a regional level, then at a local, maybe the national level, and even at local level. There, we should be able to make sure that our citizens are able to benefit from these resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Siraj, for these points. I will pass to Emmanuel from the Institute of Tax Administration for its 10 minutes. I'm not making comments now because I want to make sure that we are on track in terms of time. Emmanuel, please take over to your 10 minutes. Emmanuel? Emmanuel Masalo, thank you.
Having on, sorry.
Brian?
Yeah, we don't seem to have him on, so I'm not sure.
Okay. So can we open up for the participants to ask questions? We just have one question. I registered one question at chat and a comment from Charles. I missed some, I guess, because I was kicked off because of my network. So if Emmanuel is not there, I will open up.
He's joined, he's here.
Okay. Welcome, Emmanuel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly, Emmanuel. Welcome, and you have 10 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Fatima. Good afternoon, all of you. I'm happy to have the opportunity to contribute to this discussion, a discussion on a topic whose importance goes without saying. I will start, of course, by making a disclaimer that what I'm going to share here are my own views and do not necessarily represent the views of my employers. One of the advantages of speaking last is that I also have the opportunity to say that what I wanted to say has already been said by all the predecessor speakers. But of course, in honor of the opportunity given, I'll try to share a few perspectives. I've actually heard all the key words, contracts, tax treaties, beneficial ownership, registers, renegotiation, transparency, and so on. I think these are the things that hold the key to the success of our countries in enhancing their domestic resource mobilization initiatives and efforts. I want to pin my contribution down on the whole issue of capacities by asking the question, do we have the capacities, all the capacities that we need at the different levels that are involved in the whole process from the beginning to the end? So capacities, for example, at policy level, making sure that we have or we make sound policy choices. Do we have the capacities at legislation, at contracting level? Do we have the capacities at administration levels? I think this is the area where we must do it right as African countries, if I may say so. There are critical questions at all levels. If we may start with the policy issue, it's so clear, and perhaps that is also reflected in the divergences across our different capacities, our different choices. Even when you compare what Uganda is trying to do, what Tanzania is doing, what other countries are doing. So the whole issue of balancing between maximizing government revenue, but also remaining attractive to the companies that we want to come and do the mining for us. One of my predecessor speakers, I think, mentioned what we are trying to do in Tanzania, and maybe that appears more into the shape of correcting past mistakes, which came out quite clearly as one of the factors that have prevented us from realizing maximum benefits from the industry. Now, what happened? How did those mistakes come about? How sure are we that now where we are, we cannot repeat the same mistakes? So that goes back again to capacities. So the capacities of our negotiating teams, the capacities of our institutions. I always ask this question, for example, who is responsible for the fiscal regimes in the contracts that we sign with the companies? Is it the Ministry of Finance? Does it have all the information that it needs? Is it the sector ministry, that ministry alone? Who else is involved, and how is the coordination achieved? So that will address the policy aspect. The strength of our negotiating teams, for example. I think one of the earlier presenters mentioned the need of engaging consultant negotiators. Are we sure that is going to give us a solution to the problems that we have? You bring it to the administration, the implementation level, you will find again that we still have the same question. Do we have the capacities that we need? Capacities in the ministry, the sector ministries, for example, to ensure all the obligations, the compliance obligations of these companies are enforced, be it obligations to pay royalties, be it local content obligations, and so on. Do we have the capacities within our revenue authorities to ensure effective audits, for example? I think if we talk about, for example, the whole issue of tax audit, one of the critical factors is the cost accumulations by the companies. How able are we to see the inside of those cost accumulations? They have an impact on many other aspects, but closely related to them is the whole issue of transfer pricing problems, for example, before you even look at the impact of poorly, if that is the right word, poorly negotiated tax treaties, and so on. So I just want to say, I think our efforts should really be geared towards ensuring that we have the capacities that we need to do it right in this industry, if we are to have any hope of maximizing the take of our governments. Thank you very much, Fatima, for the opportunity given.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for these points, very important on interinstitutional coordination, on state capacity to deal with the sector, to deal with the fiscal issues. I think that your points rose by Chennai regarding the needs to advocate for closing of these loopholes in the law that enables the illicit financial flows, and also responds a lot the points arose by Siraji on the low level of contribution of extractive industries to the GDP itself, the poor fiscal regimes, and you asked who is shaping that fiscal regime? Is the Minister of Finance or the sectorial minister? The negotiation capacity, the state has that capacity to negotiate contracts, and we know how asymmetric or disembalanced this is. The process is, while the companies as a bunch of people assisting them, the government usually goes that just the minister and 2 or 3 advisors to discuss the technicalities. So these are really important points, Rose, here. The issue of transparency that was put here, the need to know the terms of the contract is important. So I will close up the floor for the participants. On the questions and answers, I found a comment from Charles thanking Siraji for the contribution. And there is a Evans comment and on African Mining Vision. I don't know if these comments is part of this conversation, but I will pass through it just for the benefit of all of us. He said that he believed there is a need to review the type of engagement periods towards establishing African Mining Vision ownership in different countries. 2009 is a long time. 12 years on, we are still struggling with the same elements. So this is a comment that I think that is to push us to reflect on, do we need to still engaging on the African mining vision? What do we do on this? There is a comment from Ramon Xavier, who is asking for the fellas from Uganda on the role for civil society in pressing for the government and private companies to contribute to more people-driven development business approach in the extractives. And he said that he's asking if do you have a differentiated policy in the mining sector, particularly for small-scale mining, artisanal, medium-scale mining, and bigger mining investors? Is the petroleum sector providing some learning to the mining subsector? So these are some other questions. There is a Miss Zelda who is raising her hand. I don't know if she wants to put it personally or she will write down her question. So before we move forward, Zelda.
Zelda, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we have these comments, and I would ask the panelists to comment briefly to them. For me, for all of you, regarding the African context and the questions that you made, all of you, which you are convergent on the lack of capacity, the needs, the capacity, which is also leading to the poor legislation, the fiscal regime, and so forth. My question is regarding the long-term experience that we were supposed to have regarding the time that these resources are being exploited in our country. What is the real problem? Is the fact that we are not learning from our mistakes, past mistakes. There is no political will. There is no people engaging or pushing for changes. What's going on? Because we are from 10 years to now, we are raising the same questions. We are advocating for the same things, but it's not changing. For me, it's really unbelievable that we're still asking for legal reforms to close loopholes, to deal with illicit financial flows at this time. What is happening? What is the real problem? I will end your comments on the question made by our colleagues over here. Thank you. I will start with Chenai, please. Chenai, and please do your final remarks at the same time. Unfortunately, we are running out of our
time. Thanks, Fatima. Some really, really great questions. I wish we had a little bit more time to explore them. But I think you ask a really great question. I think a lot of the issues that we are currently tackling, many of us can't say they're new issues. Do you know what I mean? They're issues that we've been discussing and talking about as civil society for a long time. And I think you pointed to the answer in your question when you raised the point of political will. Because I think at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, Dan said on paper, we have everything. But it comes to an issue of enforcement, it comes to the issue of implementation, but why are we still not getting it right? That's why to some degree, I am hopeful that because of the situation within which we find ourselves now because of COVID-19, where we have to now actually start to have meaningful conversation around how to increase domestic resource mobilization, that we've come to a position where we will now start to see increased political will. And I feel as civil society, we also have an opportunity to take advantage and leverage on this particular opportunity now, coming to the government with, and I love what Rachel said earlier about the fact that they already have like model legislations, that they have in place to say, listen, this is a problem we're all confronted with. We all want to achieve the same objective. let's work together. So it definitely is for me an issue of political will. Absolutely, technical capacity plays a role, but I think where there's the political will, you'll find the resources for the technical capacity. So I think that's what we need to be doing. And I think just in terms of my final remarks, I know someone earlier was talking about the AMV, and I think this is something that we as civil society, I think, need to also place a lot of pressure behind as well. We haven't seen it implemented as much as we would have wanted to since it was first adopted by the African heads of state. But the thing about the AMV is that it's a homegrown solution, to help us address the issues of mineral governance across the continent. And it speaks to key issues, for example, such as the ASM sector, which, is very dominant across the continent and needs to be part of our thinking as we think through, the reforms we want to adopt within the mining sector. So I think by and large, let's see the extent to which we can get behind the AMV and popularize it. But also secondly, the situation within which we find ourselves now is what I'm hoping is what we need to garner and generate the political will to actually start to see reform within the mineral sector. Thanks, Fatima.
But it's not a contradiction, a lack of political will with a lot of challenges that we have. We know that the access to resources internationally is reducing, so the resource mobilization capacity is shrinking, but we have a space to increase our fiscal space, taxing properly, implementing our laws. So for me, it's a contradiction. I really don't get well. It doesn't come to me to understand why we don't have that political will in a context that we do need, even to sustain our budget, to pay the bills, the bill. So how come? So, well, I'm just asking because I think that people is asking the same question.
No, absolutely. And I completely understand your question, because at the end of the day, listen, since time immemorial, we have, as African countries, been suffering from significant budget deficits. Do you know what I mean? And so the question is, it shouldn't be that difficult for us then, to think through what are the necessary measures we need to put in place, to curb the loopholes, to maximize domestic resource mobilization, but we haven't done it. And part of the reason we haven't been able to do that is because there are certain people that are benefiting from the current situation. Do you know what I mean? And unfortunately, sometimes the people who need to make the necessary measures in our legislation and policy are the same ones who are benefiting from, the current situation. And this is why, for example, in the report, when Dan talks about like beneficial ownership transparency, that is so crucial, right? For us to start to see who are those people. So for me, what I was saying is we find ourselves now where the problems we've been facing as a continent have really come to a situation where we are now between a rock and a hard place. So one would hope that now, because of this pressure, there is much more incentive, for the government to come forward and say, okay, we need to be serious now about the measures we need to put in place to address this. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm hoping that because of COVID-19, we've come to a place where now this political will that has been lacking is now going to come to the fore, and as a civil society, I think, have a role to play in pushing for that.
Okay, thank you, Shinai, for these remarks. I'm passing now over to Siraji. Siraji, please. What is your take on the state of the art of our fiscal? What is the real roots of this situation that we are living? You rose important questions on the poor contribution, fiscal regimes, but we had opportunities to reform these fiscal regimes, but we are not able to really solve the problem. What is the problem?
Thank you so much.
The roots of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for giving me the opportunity. I think civil society has a very serious role when it comes to putting the house in order. One thing that we need to not to run away is the capacity challenges by some of the government officials. For example, in Uganda, we are grappling with the revenue mobilization. Every time they keep putting taxes on internet, on OTT, the social media, where they are trying to look for low-hanging fruit, when actually there is a lot of money that is actually left in the mining sector where they are unable to do it. And particularly because they may not be having the idea of how they can do it. So if civil society can come in and be able to walk along with the government and show them this is where we can get money, this is how we can do it, this is how we can contribute, then that would be very useful. As I've already noted, Uganda is now implementing EITI. We are going to have our first report in February. And it's an opportunity where civil society is deeply involved, being that EITI has civil society as part of the tripartite. It is important that we come along and be contribute with this important research, like you guys you are doing here, with more other research, bring more information, and be able to beef up the sector. And we are able to find ways of how the sector can generate the revenues. Then also complement the transparency bit to make sure that whatever revenue is utilized very well in terms of equity, in terms of making sure that no one is left behind. And that way, we should be able to have the sector really helping us to improve our lives. Then I also saw a question in the chat where someone is asking, what is it that civil society can do to make sure that the whole change game is effected? First of all, research, number one, so that we get out the advocacy with evidence-based research. The moment the recommendations come and are practical and are workable and are well benchmarked, sometimes, yes, these duty bearers may take long to take them on, but at one point they will really appreciate and say, yes, this one is a magic bullet and it can work. And if we can really support this sector by bringing out this important research and then disseminate it, engage with the right groups of people, then that would be very good. That's why even in this kind of research dissemination that we have here, how I wish that part of our government officials were part of the core. I don't know how the sharing, the invitations were done, but it would also be a building block towards improved management of extractive. So in a nutshell, extractive revenue management and improving domestic resource mobilization is something that we cannot achieve in one day, but with the concerted effort of us, the civil society, the government, and the private sector, if we can always talk together, come together, chart a way forward, we should be able to get the best out of this sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siraji. I will move on to Emmanuel, and I will end up with Thomas. So, Emmanuel, my question to you, and I will ask you to make your final remarks too at the same time, is how do we reverse that situation of lack of capacity, poor legislation, and of course, how do we strengthen the interinstitutional coordination within the state? Over to you, Emmanuel. I see that Emmanuel's still at the room. Emmanuel Masalu?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Okay,
yes,
thank
perfectly,
you.
Perfectly.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think the first and foremost thing that we need to do and keep on doing is investing in the I would say the technical capacities and maybe the integrity of our team were involved in the entire process, from policy making, contracting to implementation. But the second thing will be actually thorough scrutiny of what we have on the ground, which I could say this very session, the paper we are discussing is a continuation of that. I think we still need to scrutinize all the documents that are currently governing our practices in this area. I will mention, for example, one of the things that tends to come out whenever we talk about the problems inhibiting our ability to maximize revenue from this industry is the issue of incentives and exemptions. Now, when we analyze this vis-a-vis the benefits, so the revenue loss versus the intended benefits, maybe the investment benefits, the local content, what do we find? Do we want to keep them as they are, or do we want to reshape them slightly? So the answer lies in thorough research. I think that the issue of political will is extremely important. And that's where your comes in, because it goes without saying that you may have the best of the geology, the best of the geography, but if something is wrong with the governance, you will not make it. Now, how we build the political will, I think it comes back to the checks and balances. I think looking at what we have done in Tanzania, one of the notable achievements, if I may say so, from the 2017 reforms is to give Parliament an enhanced role in terms of renegotiation, but also access to the contracts. I want to say I'm also happy to note that we are talking about management of the revenue itself. I think that is also a very important element worth consideration as we go along, perhaps coming up with laws to also govern how revenues from minerals are managed. So I think in conclusion, I'll say some effort is visible, but there's more work that lies ahead, and the answer lies to matters of capacity and political will, as you mentioned. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel. I will over to Thomas Scarfield. I don't have a specific question for you, so I will give you a word to say your final remarks and regarding all the comments that have been made over here. Thomas?
I think Thomas dropped off, so we can.
Yes. So at this stage, I would like to thank all of you for your participation in this webinar. In this session, my main takeaway is that there is a need and opportunity for civil society to push or advocate for closing some loopholes within the legislation in our countries to address or constrain the illicit financial flows. This is an opportunity now. This was raised by Chennai. Also, the advocacy for beneficial ownership is important for us to understand what are the implications of beneficial ownership, transparency or disclosure. And this is important even to constrain illicit financial flows that can happen from different ways, transfer price, and so forth. Also, the transparency, contract transparency was a point made here that is important to understand the terms of the contract, and I will underline in all the webinars that I participate, I say the same. There is no argument to keep the contract secrets. There is no commercial sensible information within these contracts. So we need a civil society to push, to mobilize citizens in our countries, to push for contract transparency. We have a right to know what the government negotiated on our behalf, which kind of benefits the company has, and how do we expect to benefit from these resources. All these exercises that we are doing without knowing the terms of the contracts will not be fruitful. So it's important for us even to plan for future, to know what we have agreed with these companies. And finally, the need to push for institutional capacity within our state. Is important to recognize that we have institutions, weak institutions in our countries. In some cases, weak institutions because the people are not, do not get the right skills, but in other way because these institutions are being weakened intentionally to allow the politicians, the corrupted politicians, to get benefits. So there is a lot of work for us to do as civil society. We have one more instrument to work in our advocacy, and I hope that we can use this report not only in Mozambique, in Tanzania and Uganda, but in our countries to advocate for changes, for reforms, for transparency, for integrity, for accountability within our governments. So I will go back to the organizers. Over to you, Brian. Thank you so much. Thank you all the panelists, Chennai, Thomas, Raji, Emmanuel, for your brilliant interventions. Thank you so much. Over to you, Brian.
I think it should be Riska. So Riska can go ahead, please. Or Mukasiri.
Thanks very much. I was hoping that Gloria is the overall facilitator. She was supposed to take this conversation in terms of where to end, but I'm here also to make sure that I give the closing remarks. So to start with, I want to thank everyone else, our presenters, our facilitators, for this robust conversation. The researchers who could get that evidential rigor in terms of the input that we were getting. Also to Riska and the team behind for putting this together. And it's very much important that we understand that much as we put pressure on our governments to try to come up with the robust policy measures and safeguards in terms of enhancing a greater share of revenue to plow it back in terms of increased opportunities for inclusive service delivery. The problems are not entirely of African making. Some of them go beyond us. The skewed global financial architecture and taxation system, which favors capital exporting countries and marginalizes capital importing countries in the global south. This reform agenda must be part of the conversation for us to have a clear view picture of the challenges that we face when it comes to harnessing our fair share of tax revenue from the extractive sector. So this is why the fact panel recommendations are very, very critical for us to push for their implementation. And already we are seeing huge pushbacks that are coming from OECD and others. The problems that we have discussed here, if you go to the Africa Mining Vision and the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows out of Africa, clearly articulates these challenges and way forward. So it is important that we keep on gathering evidence, like what PWYP has done, so that we have got a textured understanding, pick grounded lessons from country experiences, and see how we can use them to learn as Africa to inform our policy interventions. So thanks everyone. This is a fight that we need to constantly energize and ensure that we ratchet that political pressure that is needed for action. And it is important that we are fighting the powerful. Look at the history of slavery, colonization, the neoliberal agenda. Africa is still confronted with capital that believes that we are there to provide the resources and nothing more, raw materials. So let's also understand the agenda that we are fighting against and the need for alternatives. So if we say we are getting capital gains tax for 1 billion from selling your mineral, from your oil and gas deposits, how much did you get at first for transferring those mineral rights or oil and gas deposits? This conversation is missing altogether because we are not robust in terms of fair evaluation of our minerals and understanding our true wealth. This is my parting shot. Thanks everyone. Looking forward to more and more conversation steered by PWYP on behalf of the Stop the Bleeding Consortia, which comprises of 6 Pan-African organizations coordinated by Tax Justice Network Africa. We are very much excited, like what Chennai has said, to come in and be part of these conversations with PWYP, looking at Pillar 1 of the Africa Mining Vision, that is fiscal linkages from the mining sector with particular bias on domestic revenue and mobilization. Thank you for this awesome opportunity. Bye. You can unmute and put your video on just to say bye. And if it's possible to get everyone to put their video on so that we can get a screenshot, a camera. Just a minute, sorry. Can we all put our camera on? In a minute. Colleagues, Brian, if you can help us.
To be sure that there are no robots.
Once that is done, we are ready. Brian, can you take a screenshot for us so that at least we can have something on record? Are we good now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thanks everyone else. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, colleagues. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.